Hi everyone, welcome to an introduction to environmental health. Our textbook starts off by giving us two dictionary definitions of the environment, which are the first two on this slide. The first is really broad and inclusive, but doesn't take into consideration the complexity of natural and human constructed systems that influence health. The second definition does acknowledge complex natural systems, but does not mention non-natural systems such as energy and food systems. This definition would not include most occupational environments, which are typically human constructs. The text offers an additional definition, the third one on this slide, which is both broad and acknowledges the various types of environmental influences on health. Note the specification of non-genetic factors in the last definition. While this is technically true, it's becoming increasingly evident that environmental factors interact with genetic factors to influence disease expression. Some of your friends or family may have asked you what classes you're taking, and when you mention environmental public health, they might ask, "What's that?" If you have a hard time answering, it's okay. There's a lot of different definitions of environmental public health, and there's 4 on this slide. These are also listed on page 5, and it might be easier to read them there. Historically, environmental health has focused on reducing exposure to hazards, for example, through sanitation or occupational controls. More recently, environmental health has embraced features in the environment that promote health, for example, exposure to nature and walkable neighborhoods. What I love most about environmental health is its interdisciplinary nature. Environmental health practitioners may work with ecologists, city planners, or infectious disease specialists, just to name a few. Environmental health has been around for a really long time. Of course, natural disasters, such as floods and drought, have always challenged humans and other species. Infectious diseases such as vector-borne disease and foodborne illnesses have long plagued humans. Food preparation and preservation methods have, over the years, helped reduce exposure to foodborne pathogens, but this is still a challenge that we face today. Cooking kills pathogens, but cooking indoors using wood, coal, or even animal dung results in poor indoor air quality. This is still very much a health hazard in some countries, particularly for women who do most of the cooking. Water, sanitation, and hygiene, referred to as WASH, is both an ancient and current challenge. Many people in low-income countries do not have access to clean water, and open defecation is common where sanitation infrastructure is lacking. WASH is also critically important following natural disasters. The onset of a cholera outbreak in Haiti following earthquake recovery efforts provides an unfortunate example of the consequences of inadequate sanitation. The Industrial Revolution both intensified ancient challenges and presented new ones. As people flocked to the cities for work, sanitation and housing conditions were inadequate for the number of people and animals living in cities. In addition, the ambient or outdoor air pollution resulting from the burning of coal became problematic. The transition from working on farms to working in mills and factories presented new occupational hazards. While many of these ancient and industrial revolution challenges have been met in developed countries, these hazards remain in low-income countries. Indeed, some still pose health risks worldwide. Lead leaching from old pipes into drinking water is, unfortunately, all too common in this country. The crisis in Flint, Michigan has provided us with a tragic example of this. New hazards continue to emerge. There's an increasing number of chemicals being used in the manufacture of everyday products, from personal care products to nonstick pans. Pesticides are commonly used throughout the world. Electronic waste poses significant modern-day challenges, with the bulk of the risk among those in low-income countries where electronics are made and disposed of or recycled. While radiation is not a new hazard, humans have increasing exposures due to depletion of ozone, medical technology, air and space travel, and nuclear energy in warfare. In fact, the origins of epidemiology are based in environmental health. These pioneers were the first to make connections between health and occupation, vital statistics, geography, and living conditions, particularly relating to sanitation. Epidemiologists continue to study these relationships today. John Snow, who famously mapped cases of cholera in London in 1854, attributed the outbreak to drinking water obtained from the Broad Street pump. He convinced local officials to remove the handle from the pump, thus preventing people from accessing water from this location. While this may seem like an obvious solution to us, at the time this was quite an accomplishment, given that the predominant theory was that the disease was the result of exposure to bad air. We'll explore this outbreak further in our epidemiology module. We often credit advances in clinical medicine with the significant improvements in life expectancy that have been realized over the past 150 years. While these advances, particularly the development of vaccines and the discovery of antibiotics, have certainly made their mark, improvements in sanitation deserve just as much credit. In fact, readers of the British Medical Journal voted the sanitary revolution, clean water and sewage disposal, as the greatest advancement in health since 1840. Life expectancy is still much shorter in low-income countries that lack sanitation infrastructure, specifically clean water and sewage disposal. The textbook introduces us to the term nanny state, which has been defined as a government perceived as having excessive interest in or control over the welfare of its citizens, especially in the enforcement of extensive public health and safety regulations. This tension between individual rights and the common good is at the heart of many controversial topics, including vaccination, climate change, and the sale of raw milk. Laws banning smoking in public places and the use of cell phones while driving have been controversial, but continue to move in the direction of promoting the common good over upholding individual rights. Vermont's own motto, Freedom and Unity, represents both individualism and collectivism. There are both familiar and new challenges in the modern era of environmental health. As mentioned earlier, chemical hazards have been a hallmark of the modern times. Heavy metals like lead and arsenic have been and still are a concern, but pesticides and industrial chemicals present additional chemical hazards unique to modern history. In her book, Silent Spring, Rachel Carson rang the alarm bells to the dangers of pesticide use, specifically DDT, which was eventually banned in the United States. Importantly, she argued that humans are a part of nature, not separate from it, and that disruption of ecological systems has downstream effects on humans. The modern era has also been marked by increased recognition of occupational diseases and the effects of lead exposure on children, even at low levels. Environmental disasters resulting from improper dumping and accidental releases of chemicals have and continue to plague modern environmental health. We've also seen the development of new paradigms for the practice of environmental health. Environmental psychology is grounded in biophilia, the innate affinity for other living things, and can help predict how people will respond to various types of both natural and built environments. This is particularly important when designing environments that are intended to promote health or healthy behaviors. There's also greater focus on the interconnectedness of human health to ecological and animal health through the related disciplines of eco-health, One Health, and planetary health. Increasingly, clinicians have been considering environment in the context of the care they provide. Occupational health and industrial hygiene greatly reduce exposures to chemicals, physical, radiological, and biological hazards in the workplace. Additionally, clinicians consider the environmental community characteristics experienced by their patients, for example, air pollution exacerbating asthma or the built environment promoting physical activity. Finally, policy has greatly shaped the modern era of environmental health and includes, but is not limited to, food, air, water, and occupational standards. The text mentions 5 emerging issues in environmental health. Environmental justice was born out of the union of public health with the civil rights and environmental movements. In the United States, African Americans have been disproportionately located near environmental hazards, such as toxic waste sites. Internationally, environmental injustice is evident as people in low-income countries are exposed to toxic metals and chemicals during the salvaging and recycling of electronic waste, most of which is from high-income countries. Climate justice is similar in that those people who are producing the vast majority of the greenhouse gases fueling climate change are not the same people who are most likely to suffer from the effects of climate change. There's now greater emphasis on groups of people who are more susceptible to environmental hazards. Children are the largest such group and are uniquely vulnerable due to their stages of growth and development, behavior, and other factors. Women, the elderly, and people with underlying diseases may also be considered susceptible groups, depending on the environmental hazard. Scientific advances are changing the science and practice of environmental health. Molecular tools, including genomics, provide insights into gene-environment interactions at the population level. Researchers are taking advantage of new sources of data, for example, social media, and techniques, for example, Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, to investigate the relationships between environment and health in new ways. Global change, including human population growth, loss of biodiversity, species extinction, globalization, urbanization, economic inequities, pollution, land use changes, climate change, and conflict and displacement all provide new and unprecedented challenges to environmental health. As such, there's an increased focus on sustainability, which is, according to one definition, the ability to meet current needs without jeopardizing the needs of future generations. Environmental factors can impact health on a wide variety of spatial scales. For example, radiation can make changes at the molecular level. A chemical hazard may interact at the cellular level. A foodborne pathogen affects a person or an organism. Your workstation, the immediate surroundings, can be protective or increase your risk of ergonomic injury. Multiple factors, like a wood stove, can affect the indoor air quality in your home, which is a building. Sidewalks and bike paths make a neighborhood walkable. Affordable and reliable public transportation can reduce metropolitan transportation-related air pollution. Emergency planning for New England includes planning for flood and ice storms, two of the natural disasters to which we are most susceptible. Global treaties are needed to reduce carbon emissions in order to mitigate the most serious impact of climate change worldwide. Of course, some environmental factors work at multiple scales. The foodborne pathogens act at the cellular level in the gut to cause systemic illness in an organism. Pollution from a coal-fired power plant in one metropolitan area may cause regional pollution due to prevailing winds. This figure on upstream thinking can be viewed in your textbook on page 20, but I'm including it in this presentation to emphasize the importance of upstream thinking in environmental health. There are usually many variables to consider, both proximal and distant. Starting at the top of the figure and moving counterclockwise is driving forces. Human population is the most obvious driving force, but this can also include societal norms that influence the levels and types of consumption of food, energy, and manufactured goods. These driving forces place pressures on the environment through the use of natural resources and the production of waste and pollution. These pressures influence the state of our environment, for example, air pollution levels or the amount of mercury in fish. As a result of human interaction with our environment, for example, going for a walk outside or eating fish, exposures to particulate matter or mercury occur, which in turn may result in health effects. Environmental health practitioners should consider all these upstream steps when taking action to reduce or eliminate exposures and/or health effects. Using the example of mercury in fish, the effects on the fetus and young children, who are most susceptible, are avoided by recommending limits on certain types of fish for pregnant women and young children. Replacing coal-fired power plants with cleaner sources of energy reduces the pressures, mercury emissions, while energy conservation efforts reduce the driving forces, which is energy demand. While actions may be necessary at multiple steps, actions that are directed further upstream, such as reducing driving forces and pressures, are more effective than preventing exposures or reducing health effects once exposure has occurred. That's it for Chapter 1. If you have questions about the presentation, feel free to email me. Thanks, everybody.